The vast expanse of the galaxy stretched beyond comprehension, a universe teeming with life, civilizations, and secrets waiting to be discovered. But for humanity, the stars had always been both a symbol of hope and an unreachable dream. That dream would soon be shattered, not by the unknown, but by those they had trusted. Earth, once a planet of innovation and progress, had become the center of a growing conflict. For centuries, humans had struggled to find their place among the stars, reaching out to explore and connect with alien species. They had made mistakes, certainly, but they had also achieved great things. The Galactic Council, a powerful alliance of advanced species, had watched these humans with growing interest and concern. It was clear to the Council that Earth was on the verge of something great, but they feared that greatness would come at their expense. It began with whispers, discussions held in the shadows of council chambers, where the leaders of the galaxy's greatest species gathered. The humans were becoming too bold, too powerful, and their reckless ambition had made the council nervous. There were debates, factions within the council, some who believed humanity's rise was inevitable and necessary for the balance of the galaxy, and others who saw it as a threat that must be stopped before it could grow out of control. The decision was made. The Galactic Council would exile humanity. Earth would be cut off from the galactic core, left to survive in the farthest reaches of space. The news came in the form of a cold, calculated message broadcast to every government and organization on Earth. No longer would humans be allowed to participate in the galactic exchange. No longer would they have access to the wealth of knowledge and technology the Council had provided. They were to be banished. The reaction on Earth was one of disbelief and rage. News of the decision spread like wildfire, sweeping across the globe with the force of a storm. Governments fell and chaos began to spread. But even in the midst of the turmoil, a voice of reason emerged: General Marcus Flint. Flint was a man shaped by war, having led humanity's military forces through countless battles. He was known for his strategic brilliance and unshakable resolve. His leadership was exactly what humanity needed in these dark times. As the chaos raged, Flint gathered a group of influential leaders, scientists, and engineers to discuss how they could survive in a galaxy that had turned its back on them. "We will not bow to the Council," Flint declared, standing tall before a council of Earth's surviving leaders. "They think they can cast us aside, but they are wrong. We will rise. We will rebuild. And we will show them the power of humanity." But Flint knew the road ahead would not be easy. Earth had been dependent on the Council for so long, its resources and technology tightly linked to the galactic network. Without the help of the Council's advanced systems, humanity was suddenly thrust back into a dark age. Their access to trade, weapons, and vital resources was cut off, leaving Earth with only what it could harvest from its own world. The human race had no choice but to adapt and find new ways to survive. The first step was to gather all remaining military forces and secure the planet's most important installations. Flint called upon every able-bodied person to help fortify Earth's defenses. While the human race had long been divided by petty differences, they now found a common cause. In the face of this unprecedented threat, people from all walks of life, scientists, soldiers, engineers, and even civilians, joined the effort. Together they reinforced military bases, shielded cities, and established supply lines. The once proud cities of Earth became fortresses, as the threat of alien aggression loomed large. But even as Earth began to prepare for the worst, Flint knew it wasn't enough. The humans had to go beyond defense. They had to innovate, to create. Flint had heard rumors of an ancient alien artifact, hidden deep within the ruins of a long-forgotten colony on one of Earth's moons. It was said to hold technology far beyond anything the humans had ever known. With little to lose, Flint authorized an expedition to recover this artifact, hoping it could give humanity the edge they desperately needed. As the expedition team made its way to the moon, the atmosphere was tense. Every step they took was filled with uncertainty, and the weight of humanity's survival pressed heavily on their shoulders. There was no guarantee the artifact even existed, and even if it did, Who knew what dangers might lie in wait? When they finally reached the site, they found nothing but a crumbled and decaying structure, a ghost of a civilization long gone. But deep within its heart, they uncovered a treasure unlike anything they had ever seen. An ancient machine, glowing, faintly with power. It was a relic of a race far older and more advanced than humanity could ever hope to be. As the team began to study the artifact, they realized its potential. It could help humanity not only survive but thrive. The discovery was a turning point. General Flint, upon seeing the machine's capabilities, knew that humanity was not destined to fade into obscurity. With this technology, Earth could rebuild. With this technology, humanity could fight back against the Galactic Council, and they would have a chance to prove their worth to the galaxy. As the humans worked tirelessly to reverse engineer the artifact, they began to develop new weapons, faster than light travel, and defensive technologies that would give them an edge over any enemy. Earth would no longer be the helpless world at the mercy of the Council. They would rise, stronger than ever, and they would show the galaxy that the human spirit could not be extinguished. But even as humanity took its first steps toward rebuilding, Flint knew that the path ahead would not be without its challenges. The Galactic Council had made its decision, and they would not let humanity's rise go unchallenged. The Council's spies were already in place, watching the humans' every move. The coming struggle would test humanity's strength and resolve. But Flint was confident in one thing. The human race had been exiled, but they had not been broken. As Earth adjusted to its new reality, the people of the planet found themselves caught in a delicate balance. The Galactic Council had cast them out, but it was not the end. It was a beginning. General Marcus Flint knew that the survival of humanity would depend on how quickly they adapted to the harsh conditions of their exile. Earth could not survive alone, but they had no choice but to rely on themselves. The first step was to unite the scattered colonies that had been established over the years. These colonies, while small and isolated, were vital to humanity's survival. Flint set his sights on these outposts, gathering what remained of Earth's scattered population and encouraging them to come together under a common banner. The human race had always been a diverse collection of cultures and beliefs, but the exile had created a shared purpose, and that purpose was survival. As the colonies began to unite, Flint turned his attention to the resources they had at their disposal. Earth, while rich in natural materials, had long relied on the advanced technology of the Galactic Council to support its growing population. Without the Council, humanity was forced to fall back on older technologies. The first challenge was to find a way to generate enough energy to power the colonies and provide food and water. Flint's engineers worked tirelessly, building makeshift power plants and setting up resource-efficient farms. It was a difficult process, but humanity's creativity and resourcefulness began to shine through. In one of the farthest colonies, a team of engineers stumbled upon a broken-down space station, long abandoned by its creators. They had expected to find little of value, but what they discovered was far beyond their expectations. An array of old yet functional alien technologies, remnants of a civilization that had long since disappeared. The station had been designed to harness the energy of nearby stars, and although it was damaged, parts of it were still operational. With the help of skilled engineers and scientists, the humans began to reverse engineer the technology. For the first time since their exile, they had access to a power source that could fuel their growth. While Flint focused on securing Earth's colonies, he also knew that a strong military presence would be crucial to their survival. The Galactic Council had made it clear they would not tolerate any resistance from the humans, and Flint was determined to ensure humanity was capable of defending itself. Earth's military forces, though scattered and weakened by years of neglect, rallied under his leadership. Old warships, once retired and forgotten, were brought back into service and upgraded with newly reverse-engineered technology. Flint's forces trained harder than ever, determined to be ready for whatever the Council might throw at them. As the weeks passed, the human colonies began to grow. New settlements were founded on distant planets, each one built with the same determination: that had driven Earth's early explorers. In these colonies, humanity began to forge its own identity, no longer relying on the Galactic Council for guidance, but instead using their own ingenuity to thrive. The people of Earth discovered new worlds, explored new frontiers, and began to push the limits of what they could achieve. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Despite their progress, humanity was still a small and vulnerable species in a galaxy filled with powerful and ancient civilizations. As word spread of their survival, the Galactic Council took notice. At first, the Council dismissed humanity as a small and insignificant threat. But as the months passed, the Council began to feel a growing unease. The humans had become more resourceful, more dangerous, and the Council realized they could no longer afford to ignore the growing human presence in the galaxy. The first sign of trouble came when a fleet of unknown ships arrived at one of humanity's outermost colonies. The ships were not from the Council, but from a race of fierce nomads known as the Zorans. The Zorans had a reputation for raiding and plundering weaker species, and they were not known for making deals or offering peace. When their fleet arrived at the colony, it was clear they were there for one thing: to take what they could from the humans and leave nothing behind. Flint's commanders were quick to respond. The humans, though outnumbered, had the advantage of surprise. They had studied the Zorans' tactics and knew how to counter them. The humans fought fiercely, using their newly developed weapons and defenses to push back the invaders. The battle was long and brutal, but in the end the Zorans were forced to retreat, leaving behind a wounded but proud human colony. This victory was not without consequences. The Zorans, though beaten, had made one thing clear: humanity would face many challenges in the coming years. The galaxy was not a peaceful place, and the Council's influence was not the only threat humanity would have to contend with. Flint knew that this victory, while important, was only the beginning. Humanity had to be ready for the wars and struggles ahead. Yet even as humanity faced these challenges, Flint could see the spark of something greater. The human spirit was unyielding. They were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting to thrive, to prove to the galaxy that they had a place among the stars. And as the colonies expanded, as Earth's technology advanced, Flint could feel the tides beginning to shift. The humans were no longer the exiled, forgotten race they had once been. They were becoming something new, something powerful, and the rest of the galaxy would soon learn that underestimating humanity was a mistake they would regret. As Flint stood on the command deck of his flagship, looking out at the stars, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The journey was far from over, but humanity had taken its first steps toward greatness. The road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles, but with each victory, the human empire grew stronger. Earth was no longer just a planet on the edge of space. It was the heart of a new and mighty empire, and the galaxy would soon have to reckon with its power. The first spark of something greater had already been lit. Humanity, once a scattered and defeated race, was now beginning to show the galaxy the true strength of its spirit. Under General Marcus Flint's leadership, Earth's colonies were growing rapidly, each new world a testament to the resilience of human beings. What had once been a fragile race, exiled and isolated on the fringes of space, was now taking its first steps toward becoming a true power in the galaxy. As the colonies expanded, Flint realized that unity was their greatest strength. The various human settlements, once divided by politics and resources, were now bound together by a common cause. No longer would humanity live in the shadow of the Galactic Council. No longer would they cower in fear of alien forces. They were building something strong, something lasting: the human empire. The newly established human settlements were thriving. The once barren worlds had been transformed into rich, productive colonies, and the people of Earth were becoming experts in the art of survival. Their new homes were filled with life, from the bustling city centers to the vast, lush fields that stretched across the newly terraformed landscapes. Humanity was learning how to make the most of their resources, to use what they had left to create a society far stronger than before. While the colonies flourished, Flint knew that in order to maintain their growth, they would need to secure even more resources. The planets that humanity had settled on were just the beginning. There were many more in the galaxy, many more that had yet to be discovered. Flint gathered a team of the best scouts, explorers, and engineers to find new worlds for the Empire to colonize. The first great expedition was to a distant star system on the edge of human space. The system was known to be rich in minerals, and it was a potential goldmine for the growing Empire. But there was a problem. The star system was in an area of space known for its danger. It was located near the borders of the Galactic Council's territory, and many explorers had gone missing in the area. Some said the region was cursed, others said it was filled with dangerous alien life forms. Despite the risks, Flint knew that this was an opportunity they couldn't ignore. With his command, a large fleet of human ships set off toward the unknown. The journey was long, and the path ahead was filled with uncertainty. The crew members aboard the ships knew the dangers they faced, but they also knew what was at stake. Humanity's future depended on their success. After weeks of travel, the fleet arrived at the star system. To their surprise, the region was not as hostile as they had expected. The planets were rich in the resources they needed, and the system itself was relatively safe from the threats they had feared. But as the human ships began to land and establish their presence on the planets, they encountered something unexpected, an alien species unlike any they had ever seen. The aliens were large, towering creatures with scales that shimmered like glass. They were peaceful, but their society was ancient, and their technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. The aliens called themselves the Thalrics, and they had watched over the star system for millennia. Their civilization had once thrived, but it had long since fallen into decline. The Thalrics had no interest in war or conquest, but they were deeply protective of their territory. At first, the Thalrics were suspicious of the humans. They saw them as invaders, and there were tense moments where both sides were ready to fight. But Flint, ever the strategist, saw the potential for diplomacy. He sent emissaries to meet with the Thalrics leaders, offering peace and a chance for cooperation. The negotiations were difficult, but Flint's patience paid off. The Thalrics, impressed by humanity's resilience and determination, agreed to share their knowledge and resources. This marked a turning point for humanity. The alliance with the Thalrics opened up new possibilities for the human empire. The Thalrics taught the humans advanced techniques in energy production, propulsion, and even medicine. In return, humanity shared its own innovations, particularly in areas like warfare, which had become a necessary focus for survival. Together, the two species began to build a new future, one based on cooperation and mutual respect. Back on Earth, the news of the alliance spread like wildfire. Flint's name became a symbol of human strength and vision. People everywhere, from the colonies to the homeworld, felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer simply survivors, they were thriving, and their empire was beginning to take shape. As humanity's influence grew, so did its enemies. The Galactic Council, once dismissive of humanity's power, began to take notice. The news of the human alliance with the Thalrics spread quickly through council circles, and it didn't take long for them to realize that humanity was no longer an insignificant player in the galactic landscape. A meeting was called in the heart of the Galactic Council. Representatives from the Council's most powerful species gathered to discuss the growing human threat. Many of them argued that humanity's rise could not be allowed to continue. The human empire, they believed, was a dangerous force that could disrupt the delicate balance of power they had spent centuries establishing. The council was divided, but one thing was clear. They saw humanity as a threat. They had underestimated the human race once, but they would not make that mistake again. Despite the growing tension, Flint remained calm. He knew that humanity's rise would not be without opposition, but he also knew that they had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The human empire was not just about survival. It was about proving that humanity could stand tall in the face of adversity, and that they could hold their own against the galaxy's most powerful forces. With each new victory, the human empire grew. New colonies were established, new alliances formed, and humanity's military strength became a force to be reckoned with. The human race had risen from the ashes of its exile, and now it stood on the edge of something even greater. The Galactic Council may have exiled them, but they had underestimated humanity's will to survive and thrive. And now, the galaxy would soon know that the human empire was a force that would not be easily denied. For a long time, the Galactic Council had believed that the exile of humanity would be the end of their influence. They expected humans to fade into the darkness of space, never to rise again. But now, humanity was rising fast. Too fast. The news of the growing human empire spread across the galaxy. Earth had not only survived, but had formed strong colonies, built powerful ships, and even made peaceful contact with the ancient Thalrics. What shocked the Council the most was how quickly humans were adapting alien technology, improving it, and turning it into weapons and tools stronger than what many Council species had. At a secret meeting on the planet Zalian Prime, the Council's leaders gathered. The chamber was silent as the Council's high speaker, a tall and silver-skinned being named Varak, addressed the assembly. The humans were warned, Varak said coldly. They were given a chance to learn, to grow under our guidance. They were exiled, not destroyed. But now, they defy us. They build empires. They form alliances. This cannot continue. Some leaders argued for peace. Perhaps we can speak to them, one suggested. They have shown wisdom. They may listen. But most were afraid. The humans, they said, were dangerous. They grew stronger every year, and worst of all, they were unpredictable. So the decision was made. The Galactic Council would strike first. A massive fleet was prepared, one of the largest in galactic history. Dozens of warships, cruisers, and fighter squadrons were gathered, built from the finest technology of the Council's combined forces. Their goal was simple: destroy the human empire before it grew any further. Back on Earth, General Marcus Flint received word of the Council's fleet from hidden allies within the outer systems. His face was calm as he read the report, but inside, he knew the storm was coming. The Council is afraid, Flint said during a meeting with his top commanders, and afraid enemies are the most dangerous kind. Flint immediately began preparations. The humans didn't have a fleet as large as the Council's, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in innovation. Every ship in the human navy had been designed with flexibility, speed, and powerful energy shields. And with the help of the Thalrics, they had developed new weapons that could pierce even the strongest defenses. He ordered the construction of deep space traps, mines hidden in asteroid fields, stealth beacons that could confuse enemy sensors, and gravitational lures that could pull large ships into ambush zones. Flint's plan was not to fight the Council fleet head-on, but to outsmart them. Soon the first wave of the Council's fleet entered human space. Their plan was to strike a key colony called Nova Reach, one of humanity's newest and fastest-growing settlements. The Council believed a quick, brutal attack would shatter human morale, but they were wrong. As the fleet approached Nova Reach, they were caught in a trap. Flint had predicted their path and placed his ships in a hidden position near a field of far, icy moons. As the Council fleet entered the system, they suddenly lost all communication. Their long-range sensors were jammed. Before they could react, the human ship struck. Explosions filled the black sky. Human fighters darted between the massive enemy cruisers, striking weak points with precision. Council ships fired back, but their shots missed more often than they hit. The humans used clever decoys and unexpected flight patterns. Within hours, nearly half the Council fleet was in ruins. The rest fled, but they did not escape easily. Flint had placed more traps along their escape path. Mines exploded beneath their hulls, and several ships were pulled into a nearby planet's gravity well. Only a few ships made it back to Council space. The message was clear. Humanity would not fall easily. The Galactic Council was furious. They had expected victory. Instead, they had suffered one of the worst defeats in their history. Even the peaceful members of the Council could no longer deny the truth. Humanity was strong. Humanity was smart. And humanity would not go down without a fight. On Earth, the people celebrated. News of the battle spread quickly. For the first time, humans believed they could truly win against their former rulers. General Flint, though proud, reminded them that this was just the beginning. They will return, he warned. And next time they will bring more firepower, more ships, more anger. We must be ready. Flint began to push for even faster advancement. More ships were built, more colonies were fortified. Human scientists, now working side by side with Thalric's engineers, developed new technologies, stronger energy shields, faster jump drives, and powerful new weapons that used controlled bursts of star energy. At the same time, Flint sent envoys to other fringe civilizations, those who had also suffered under the Council's rule. Many were skeptical of the humans, but after hearing about the battle at Nova Reach, their minds began to change. One by one, small factions and independent planets began to support the human empire. This was more than just survival now. It was revolution. Still, Flint knew the road ahead would be dangerous. The Council would never accept a human-led power in the galaxy. There would be more battles. There would be more sacrifices. But he also knew something else. Something the Council had never understood. Humans didn't just survive hardship. They grew stronger because of it. Their exile had not been their end. It had been their rebirth, and now, as the stars watched silently, the human empire stood firm, its banners flying proudly from colony to colony, its people united and ready for the next storm. The Galactic Council had struck back, but humanity had struck harder, and the galaxy had begun to change. The defeat of the Galactic Council's fleet at Nova Reach had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. What the Council had assumed would be a quick and decisive victory had turned into a humiliating loss. It was a message humanity had been waiting to send. They were no longer weak, no longer exiled. The galaxy would have to reckon with them, but the victory, though significant, was just the beginning. General Marcus Flint knew that the battle for humanity's future was far from over. The Council, humiliated but still powerful, would not stop trying to crush the growing human threat. Yet Flint was not merely focused on fighting. He knew the key to humanity's survival was not just military strength, but unity. If humans were to win the war for their place in the galaxy, they would need allies. They would need to unite the scattered species and bring them into the fold. The first step was to solidify humanity's hold on the colonies they had already established. These colonies were spread across several star systems, but each one was built with the same purpose in mind: to survive, to grow, and to prove that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Flint knew that unity would make humanity's power greater than the sum of its parts. With Nova Reach secured, the next goal was to reach out to the neighboring species. Humanity had already made a valuable ally in the Thalrics, but there were other races in the galaxy who had long been oppressed by the Galactic Council. Many of these species were distrustful of humans. They had seen the Council's power firsthand, and they had learned to fear the might of the Council's fleets. But Flint had a secret weapon: hope. Humanity's rise wasn't just about military strength. It was about a new way of thinking, a way that promised freedom from the tyranny of the Council. Flint offered these species something the Council never had: the freedom to choose their own destiny. In one of the most pivotal moments of the human expansion, Flint sent envoys to the Nerivians, a once proud race of explorers who had been forced into subjugation by the Council. For years, the Nerivians had been enslaved, their knowledge of space exploration stolen by the Council. They had lost their will to fight back. But Flint saw something in them: the spark of resistance. The Nerivian leaders, led by the wise and powerful Chancellor Vyra, initially hesitated to speak with the humans. The Nerivians had no reason to trust anyone after centuries of being under the Council's thumb. However, after hearing the stories of humanity's fight, of their victory at Nova Reach, Vyra agreed to meet. At the meeting, Flint was blunt. "I don't offer you a chance for revenge. I offer you a chance to be free. No more orders from the Council, no more chains. Join us, and together, we can build something better, something lasting." Vyra was quiet for a long time, watching Flint with cautious eyes. "Your words sound too good to be true," she said at last. Why should we believe that humanity will not become what the Council was? A power that seeks to control us? Flint's answer was simple. Because humanity has been at the bottom. We know what it's like to fight for every scrap. We know how it feels to be cast aside, to be forced into a corner. We will never become what we fought against. The Nerivians, after much deliberation, agreed to join humanity's cause. They had nothing to lose, and the promise of freedom was too great to ignore. With the Nerivians now allied with humanity, Flint turned his attention to other races in the galaxy. One by one, species that had been oppressed or ignored by the Council began to rally to the human empire's banner. The Jorath, a fierce warrior race, and the Vryn, an advanced race of scientists, each pledged their support. The human empire grew, not just in strength but in legitimacy. However, not everyone was on board. The Galactic Council, despite their losses, still controlled vast parts of the galaxy. They had many allies, and some of those allies were ready to fight back. The next test came when the Council's remnants launched a full-scale invasion of the newly allied Nerivian worlds. They believed that if they could break this alliance, they could stop the human expansion before it became too powerful. The invasion came swiftly, and the Nerivians were caught off guard. But Flint had learned from his earlier battles. The humans, now united with their new allies, were ready. The Nerivians, with their advanced knowledge of space warfare, were able to help humanity repel the initial Council invasion. But the war was far from over. Flint knew that the only way to end this conflict for good was to take the fight to the Council itself. Humanity's next step was to strike directly at the heart of the Galactic Council. General Flint ordered his fleet to gather its strength. He knew that this battle would be the deciding one. If humanity could break through the Council's defenses and strike a blow at their capital, it would send a message to every species in the galaxy. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The galaxy would belong to those who were willing to fight for it. The invasion was swift and brutal. The human empire's ships, now reinforced by their alien allies, fought their way through Council space, cutting through defenses and pushing back fleets. For the first time, the Council's might was no longer a guarantee of victory. The human empire's forces, though smaller in number, fought with an unmatched determination. At the Council's capital, the final battle began. The streets of the great capital city shook as human warships dropped from the sky, landing on the planet's surface. The Council's defenses were strong, but they were no longer invincible. The humans, driven by years of struggle and sacrifice, pushed forward. Relentlessly, Flint led the charge, and as the human forces stormed the Council's main citadel, he could feel the weight of history on his shoulders. The final showdown was fierce. The Galactic Council, once so powerful, had finally been overwhelmed. Their leaders, many of them fleeing, were captured or forced into surrender. The battle was won and humanity stood victorious. The Galactic Council had been overthrown. As Flint looked out over the capital city, now in ruins but also free, he knew that the galaxy had changed forever. The human empire was no longer an exile. It was a force to be reckoned with. And with their new allies, humanity would rebuild the galaxy, one world at a time. The galaxy had changed forever. In the aftermath of the fall of the Galactic Council, General Marcus Flint stood on the balcony of the newly formed human empire's capital. Below him, the streets of the once great capital city were filled with a new energy. People from every corner of the galaxy, humans, Nerivians, Jorath, and many other species, celebrated their newfound freedom. For the first time in history, the galaxy was beginning to unite under a banner of cooperation, not conquest. But Flint knew this peace would not last. The collapse of the Council had left a power vacuum in the galaxy. Many factions, both old and new, would vie for control, and not all would be willing to cooperate. Flint, though a hero to his people, knew that his true test had just begun. The final battle had been won, but the war for the future of the galaxy was far from over. The Council's capital, once the heart of galactic power, had fallen. The leaders of the Council had been captured or fled to the deepest corners of space, leaving their once proud empire in ruins. But the destruction of the Council was not the end. It was the beginning of a new era. Flint stood with his closest advisors, Vyra, the Nerivian Chancellor, and Eno, the leader of the Jorath warriors. Together, they formed the core of the new ruling council of the human empire, which would guide the galaxy toward peace and prosperity. But there was one thing Flint had learned from the years of exile and war. The road to peace was often the hardest of all. Now that we have the council's capital, what do we do with it? Vyra asked. Her tone was calm, but Flint could sense the tension behind her words. The fall of the council had left many of their allies eager to claim their share of the spoils. Other species, especially those who had been oppressed for centuries, were hungry for power. The temptation to seize control was strong. We rebuild, Flint replied, his voice firm. The fall of the council is not an invitation to take more power. It's a chance to create something better, something united. We must lead by example. Our strength is not just in our military or our resources. It's in our ability to bring people together. Eno, the Jorath leader, nodded in agreement. It won't be easy, he said. There are many who still see us as invaders, not liberators. The galaxy is full of those who want to see humanity fail. I know, Flint said, but we've come this far because we never stopped believing in our cause. We fought for freedom, and now we must fight for unity. The decision was made. The new human empire would not be built on conquest, but on cooperation. Flint and his council began reaching out to the remaining factions of the former Galactic Council, offering peace instead of war. Many species, tired of the Council's dominance, accepted the offer. Slowly, the galaxy began to stabilize. However, not all factions were ready to lay down their arms. A group of radical separatists, loyal to the old ways of the Galactic Council, rallied together and began to make plans for war. They were led by a charismatic and ruthless leader, Zethar, a former council general who had escaped the final battle and was now calling for revenge. Zethar's forces, though smaller in number, were highly trained and well-armed. They had a stronghold in a remote part of the galaxy, and they were preparing to strike at the heart of the human empire. Flint knew that a full-scale war would be disastrous for everyone. The galaxy had just come through one of the bloodiest conflicts in its history. Another war would tear it apart. But Flint also knew that peace was not something that could be given away. It had to be fought for. The human empire had no choice but to meet Zethar's forces head-on. The final battle came swiftly. Zethar's fleet, a powerful armada of warships, launched an assault on the human empire's core systems. His plan was simple: strike fast, overwhelm the human defenses, and reclaim the galaxy for the old order. It was a battle that would determine the future of the galaxy once and for all. General Flint, though confident in the strength of his forces, knew that this would be his greatest challenge yet. The human empire was strong, but Zethar's followers were fierce, and they had nothing to lose. Flint's fleet, along with the forces of the Nerivians and Jorath, moved to intercept Zethar's armada. The two forces clashed in the void of space, their weapons lighting up the darkness with explosions and blinding beams of energy. Ships of all sizes engaged in furious combat, their crews fighting for their future. The battle raged on for hours, each side refusing to give ground. Zethar's forces were relentless, but the humans, with their ingenuity and drive, held their own. Flint, leading the charge aboard his flagship, directed his forces with precision. Every maneuver, every strike, was carefully calculated. They couldn't afford to lose. Then, in a moment of brilliance, Flint ordered his fleet to perform a high-risk maneuver, a sudden shift in formation designed to draw Zethar's fleet into an ambush. The maneuver worked, and Zethar's fleet was caught off guard. Human fighters and warships moved with the speed and precision that only their unique adaptability could achieve. They destroyed key targets in Zethar's fleet, disabling his flagship. Zethar, seeing his forces crumble, attempted to flee, but Flint was ready. A final strike from the human fleet disabled Zethar's ship, forcing him to surrender. The battle was won, With Zethar's defeat, the last of the opposition to the human empires, rule was crushed. The galaxy, battered and scarred from years of war, began to rebuild once again. In the days that followed, Flint and his council worked to solidify the peace. The human empire did not seek domination but cooperation. The new government was formed, not in the image of the Galactic Council, but in a new vision of unity, freedom, and shared purpose. Humanity had risen from exile and forged an empire not through force alone, but through determination, wisdom, and the belief that all beings, no matter their origin, deserved a chance at a better life. The galaxy was vast, but now it had a new heart, a heart that beat for all the species that called it home. General Flint looked out over the galaxy, no longer filled with fear, but with hope. Humanity had faced its darkest hour, and it had emerged, victorious. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while the future felt bright. The stars no longer seemed so far away,